D-Day from the German perspective, June 6, 1944, 0:15 hours. Strongpoint, WN62, Omaha Beach. Gefreiter Heinrich Severloh methodically wiped down the barrel of his MG-42 machine gun inside the reinforced concrete bunker facing the channel. In his pocket rested a letter from his sweetheart in Metzingen, promising to wait faithfully until the war's glorious conclusion. The invasion will be their grave. We'll hurl them back into the sea within hours. He had written those confident words to her only 3 days earlier, after Field Marshal Rommel himself had inspected their defenses. The Desert Fox had peered through Seal's gun slit, examined the interlocking fields of fire, and nodded in approval. When they come, Rommel had said, this beach will be their cemetery. Through the narrow embrasure, Seal could see only calm darkness across the channel. The night was tranquil, almost deceptively peaceful. In less than 12 hours, that same young soldier would be found weeping uncontrollably in his shattered bunker, surrounded by over 13,000 spent shell casings, his weapon's barrel warped by heat, watching, an armada so immense that his mind refused to comprehend what his eyes beheld, though Seal would later claim to have inflicted between 1,000 and 2,000 casualties. Historians find this improbable, given that total American losses at Omaha from all causes numbered around 2,400. The arithmetic of German defeat was about to be written not in strategic briefings or intelligence memos, but in the stunned recollections of men who witnessed the greatest amphibious invasion in history, from the wrong side of the gun sight. The Atlantic Wall stretched 2,400 miles from Norway to the Spanish frontier, what Nazi propaganda boasted as the most formidable defensive line ever constructed. Along Normandy's coastline, 58 divisions of mixed quality occupied positions that had consumed 17 million cubic meters of concrete and 1.2 million tons of steel. Hitler himself had proclaimed it impregnable. The fortifications at Omaha seemed to justify such faith. According to the U.S. Army Center of Military History, the Germans had erected 8 concrete bunkers, 35 pillboxes, 4 artillery batteries, 18 anti-tank emplacements, 45 rocket sites, 85 machine gun nests, and 6 mortar pits. The beach itself had been turned into a killing zone, 3,700 obstacles sown in the tidal shallows, including Belgian gates, Czech hedgehogs, and wooden stakes tipped with teller mines. Behind the beaches lay 6.5 million mines, though Rommel had requested 10 times that number. Colonel Ernst Goth, commanding the 916th Grenadier Regiment near Bayeux, had calculated his defensive power. His 4 batteries could, in theory, deliver 120 rounds per minute into the landing zones. Combined with nearby batteries, the Germans could unleash devastating firepower on any assault. But these calculations assumed limitless ammunition, an assumption that would soon prove disastrously wrong. June 5th brought weather that Luftwaffe meteorologist Walter Stuba in Paris declared impossible for an invasion. Winds howled at 25 knots, waves rose to 6 feet, and low clouds hung at 500 feet. Using U-boat data and weather stations, Stuba confidently assured High Command that conditions would remain unsuitable for at least 2 weeks. Many senior officers relaxed their vigilance. Rommel himself had departed for Germany to celebrate his wife's birthday, carrying a pair of gray suede shoes bought in Paris. General Friedrich Dollmann, commanding the 7th Army, had ordered his division commanders to attend war games in Rennes. Even the naval patrols that usually swept the channel had been canceled due to rough seas. That misplaced meteorological certainty would mark the first German misjudgment. Unbeknownst to Stuba, the Allies possessed weather outposts in Greenland and reconnaissance. Flights over the Atlantic that detected a brief lull in the storm, a 36-hour window that Group Captain James Stagg identified and Eisenhower seized. At 23:15 on June 5th, radar stations along the Norman coast began detecting unusual activity. Freya and Würzburg radar sets registered massive aerial formations approaching from the north. The operators, however, dismissed it. believing it another Allied diversionary raid meant to keep them uneasy. By Z0:30 on June 6, however, reports pouring in contradicted all assumptions. Fallschirmjäger paratroopers were landing across Normandy, but the accounts were chaotic. Some reported drops to the east, others to the west. Some claimed they were British, others American. Dummy paratroopers rigged with firecrackers, part of Operations Titanic and Rupert, added to the confusion. Major Hans von Luck, commander of the 125th Panzer Grenadier Regiment of the 21st Panzer Division, was among the first to grasp the seriousness of the situation. Awakened by the reports, he immediately requested permission to counterattack. The reply from headquarters was chilling in its complacency. Do not move until the situation clarifies. Von Luck later wrote in his memoir, Panzer Commander, I knew at that moment we were lost. The paratroopers were clearly marking flanks for a landing. Every minute we waited gave them time to consolidate. Yet we sat, paralyzed by our own command structure. June 6th, 05:30 hours. As dawn's first gray light crept across the channel, German forward observers began reporting something their training had never prepared them for. Whether or not Rommel himself was present remains disputed, even by seal. But what is beyond doubt is that German eyes across Normandy beheld a sight beyond imagination. From horizon to horizon, the sea was filled with ships. Not dozens, not hundreds, but thousands. A fleet of every conceivable size and design, from colossal battleships to tiny landing craft, blanketed the channel like a gray metallic tide. According to official Allied records, the invasion armada numbered 6,939 vessels, 1,213 warships, 4,026 landing craft, 736 auxiliary ships, and 864 merchant vessels. It was the greatest naval armada ever assembled in the history of warfare. For the German defenders, long nourished on propaganda about Allied weakness and disunity, the sight was psychologically shattering. Bernhard Furking, an artillery officer stationed at WN-62 who would fall later that same day, reportedly told his men they were witnessing the whole world arriving at our doorstep. At 05:35 hours, the naval bombardment began. Nothing in the Germans' experience, neither the inferno of the Eastern Front nor the most ferocious RAF raids, had prepared them for what followed. The battleship USS Texas alone unleashed 255 14-inch shells at Pointe du Hoc in just 34 minutes, according to records from the Naval History and Heritage Command. HMS Warspite, the first vessel to open fire on D-Day around 05 EU, would discharge over 300 15-inch rounds in the first 48 hours, including 96 against German positions on June 9th. The cumulative weight of naval fire exceeded anything the Wehrmacht had ever endured. According to post-war testimonies archived by the German Federal Archives, concrete bunkers once thought invincible splintered under the bombardment. Men were buried alive, dug out, and buried again as the shells rained down without pause. The psychological toll matched the physical devastation. Fortifications in which they had placed absolute faith were crumbling like sandcastles before the tide. As the bombardment roared on, the Luftwaffe's impotence became painfully clear. Oberst Josef Pips Priller, commanding Jagdgeschwader 26, received orders to attack the invasion fleet with his entire force. His reply, recorded in his unit's war diary, was bitterly terse. What entire force? I have 2 planes. The Luftwaffe, which had once promised air supremacy over any invasion, could muster only 319 sorties against 14,674 Allied missions that day. Priller and his wingman, Unteroffizier Heinz Wodarczyk, carried out the sole Luftwaffe attack on the beaches that morning, strafing Sword Beach once in their FW-190A8 fighters before fleeing from overwhelming Allied air cover. Their brief, futile sortie became a lasting symbol of German helplessness. The Knights of the Air reduced to a desperate gesture. At 06:30, the first assault waves reached the beaches. Despite the bombardment, German gunners manned their posts and opened fire. What followed was slaughter that stunned even veterans of Stalingrad. Heinrich Severloh, the machine gunner at WN-62, began firing at 06:35 from one of the few undamaged bunkers with a perfect field of fire across Omaha. In his 2005 memoir, WN-62, Erinnerungen an Omaha Beach, Severloh claimed to have fired 13,500 rounds over 9 hours. While historians dispute his casualty estimates, his MG-42, firing 1,200 rounds per minute in controlled bursts, played a significant role in the carnage later immortalized as Bloody Omaha. The defenders soon suffered what historians would later call material shock, the psychological collapse brought on by confronting overwhelming force. No matter how many attackers fell, more kept coming. Every destroyed landing craft was replaced by 3 more. Every silenced gun nest drew instant retribution from seemingly limitless naval fire. By midday, ammunition shortages crippled the defenses. German plans had calculated expenditure for a limited assault, not a full-scale invasion. Records show that positions equipped for 3 days of battle exhausted their ammunition within hours. Artillery units faced the same crisis. Stockpiled shells vanished under the relentless pace of fighting. Attempts to move reserve ammunition forward failed. Every road lay under constant Allied fighter-bomber attack. In contrast, Allied firepower seemed inexhaustible. German observers later remarked that American destroyers would unleash hundreds of shells on a single target, while German gunners by afternoon were rationed to 4 rounds per gun per day. The long-awaited Panzer counterattack, which Field Marshal Rommel had insisted must throw the invaders back into the sea, never materialized in time. The 21st Panzer Division, the only armored unit near the beaches, received its attack order at 10 Binds, 4 hours too late. When it finally advanced at 16:20, the division fought its way between British airborne zones toward the coast. Divisional records show they reached the shore between Lyon-sur-Mer and Luc-sur-Mer around 19 Schreikirchen, the only German armored force to reach the sea on D-Day. But at 21 Wang, they witnessed the arrival of Operation Mallard, 250 gliders delivering reinforcements to the British 6th Airborne Division. Believing themselves about to be cut off, they withdrew. By nightfall, the division had lost 54 tanks and armored vehicles, roughly a quarter of its strength in a single day. The counterattack also met a bewildering new enemy, the specialized Allied armor known as Hobart's Funnies, tanks fitted with flails for mine clearing, flamethrowers, and bridge-laying gear. To many Germans, they seemed like machines from another era of warfare entirely. Across Normandy, German units faced challenges unlike anything in their experience. Massive airborne forces, the British 6th Airborne and America's 82nd and 101st Divisions, operated behind their lines, spreading chaos and confusion. Oberst Friedrich von der Heydte, Germany's most seasoned paratroop commander, later admitted, "The Allied airborne operation was everything ours had never been. Vast, coordinated, and fully supplied. We dropped battalions. They dropped divisions. We had single aircraft. They had endless streams of gliders and transports. The appearance of Allied paratroopers everywhere shattered German nerve. Units hesitated to move, fearing ambushes. Some fired at shadows, even at their own men. Communications collapsed under air attack and resistance sabotage. The French resistance, activated by coded BBC broadcasts, severed cables and destroyed relay stations. Radio signals were jammed by Allied electronic warfare units. General Lieutenant Max Pemsel, Chief of Staff of the 7th Army, tried desperately to coordinate the defense from his headquarters at Le Mans. His war diary recorded growing despair as contact with frontline units disintegrated. By noon, entire divisions had vanished from the network. Commanders acted in isolation, ignorant of the broader situation. By nightfall on June 6th, the myth of the impregnable Atlantic Wall lay in ruins. The Luftwaffe had effectively vanished over Normandy. The Kriegsmarine managed to sink a single destroyer, USS Corrie, at the cost of 15 E-boats and numerous smaller craft. General Lieutenant Wilhelm Richter of the 716th Division, which had borne the brunt of the British landings, sent his grim report to 7th Army Headquarters. Combat strength, 35%. All strong points lost. Artillery, 90% destroyed. Enemy advancing inland. The statistics told a narrative of total tactical collapse, despite countless individual acts of valor. In a single day, German forces endured losses comparable to those of a major engagement, while the Allies continued pouring fresh divisions ashore as if D-Day were merely the opening act rather than the climax. Throughout the night of June 6th to 7th, German formations attempted to regroup and launch counterattacks. These efforts only underscored the full extent of Allied dominance. Every movement was detected by radar, exposed by flares, and obliterated by artillery or naval bombardment. Hans von Lux's Panzer Grenadiers, finally unleashed a counterattack, advanced toward Sword Beach under darkness. In his memoirs, he recalled that they were instantly illuminated by parachute flares and subjected to devastating fire from destroyers offshore. It was as bright as day, he wrote. Every man, every vehicle stood out clearly. The shells struck with perfect precision. We lost half our strength without ever seeing the enemy. Meanwhile, Allied reinforcements poured in. The artificial mulberry harbors were already being assembled. Supply ships anchored in perfect rows. The invasion was not merely succeeding, it was evolving into permanence. As German reinforcements attempted to reach Normandy, they found their movements completely paralyzed. Every road, rail line, and bridge lay under relentless air assault. Wehrmacht transport records later revealed that units expected to reach the front in one day often took up to 2 weeks. The 2nd SS Panzer Division, Das Reich, stationed near Toulouse, required 17 days to arrive, losing nearly 30% of its vehicles to Allied air attacks before ever engaging the enemy. The psychological effect was shattering. If they could not even reach the battlefield intact, how could they hope to affect its outcome? Allied logistics, by contrast, functioned with astonishing precision. LSTs, landing ship tank, unloaded entire armored regiments within hours. Within days of the landings, the Allies were disembarking 15,000 tons of supplies per day, more than the entire German army in Normandy consumed in a week. By June 12th, the German front in Normandy was nearing psychological collapse. Casualties had climbed to 26,000, killed, wounded, or missing, roughly the strength of 2 divisions. Replacements were scarce. Allied power grew by the hour. Carentan fell on June 12th, linking Utah and Omaha beaches. The paratroopers of the 6th Fallschirmjäger Regiment, elite troops who had never before retreated, fell back in disarray. Their commander, Friedrich von der Heydte, reported grimly, "My regiment no longer exists as a fighting unit. The survivors are broken men." On June 13th, SS Obersturmführer Michael Wittmann achieved one of the few German tactical victories in Normandy. According to British records, he destroyed 13 to 14 tanks, 2 anti-tank guns, and 13 to 15 armored carriers during the Battle of Villers-Bocage in only 15 minutes. German propaganda seized upon this success as proof that German arms could still triumph. Yet even this victory revealed the futility of their position. Wittmann's Tiger, disabled in the engagement, was replaced only with difficulty. British losses were replenished within hours. The brilliance of individual German tank crews could not overcome industrial arithmetic. Wittmann, himself credited with 138 tank kills across all fronts, was killed on August 8th when his Tiger was destroyed, either by British gunner Joe Eakins of the Northamptonshire Yeomanry or by Canadian fire. Historians still debate the details. The Wehrmacht's greatest tank ace was eliminated by an opponent who could afford to lose 10 tanks for every Tiger destroyed. The fall of Cherbourg on June 26th delivered another crushing blow. The port, fortified for 4 years and held by 21,000 men, was expected to resist for months. It fell in 5 days of heavy combat. General Lieutenant Karl Wilhelm von Schlieben, who had vowed to defend Cherbourg to the last bullet, surrendered instead. In post-war interrogation, he admitted that resistance became meaningless against an enemy with inexhaustible resources, a refrain repeated across German accounts of Normandy. Operation Cobra, launched July 25th, dealt the final decisive strike. According to U.S. Army Air Force's records, the preparatory bombardment employed 1,583 heavy bombers, 380 medium bombers, and 550 fighter bombers, dropping more than 4,100 tons of explosives over a zone barely 7,000 yards wide and 2,500 yards deep. General Lieutenant Fritz Bayerlein, commanding Panzer Lehr Division, reported to Army Group B, "My division is annihilated." The psychological effect on the survivors is indescribable. They are no longer soldiers but broken men. The bombardment was so overwhelming that it even killed Lieutenant General Leslie McNair, the highest-ranking American officer, lost in the European theater, who had been observing from what was considered a safe distance. If American generals were not safe from their own firepower, what chance did German soldiers have? What chance did German soldiers have? The Falaise Pocket, August 12–21, became the graveyard of German forces in Normandy. Allied intelligence, later confirmed by German records, estimated 10,000 killed, 50,000 captured, and more than 300 tanks and 2,500 vehicles destroyed. Survivors described scenes of apocalyptic ruin. Roads, by the campaign's end, German losses from June 6th to August 31st totaled approximately 320,000, 30,000 killed, 80,000 wounded, and 210,000 missing or captured. Over 2,300 tanks and 2,027 aircraft were destroyed. In contrast, Allied losses numbered 29,672, with replacements arriving faster than casualties occurred. Around 4,000 tanks were lost but replaced within weeks. 4,111 aircraft out of a force of over 13,000 fell, yet the skies remained theirs. The disparity revealed a fundamental truth. Germany was fighting a material war it could never win, against an enemy with near-limitless reserves. Professional German officers were often the most candid about the disaster. General der Truppen Heinrich Eberbach, who took command after Rommel was wounded, reported to OKW on August 1st. The enemy's material superiority is at least 20-1 in artillery, 10-1 in tanks, and absolute in the air. He replaces all losses in days. We can replace nothing. General Hans Speidel, Rommel's chief of staff, later wrote in his 1949 memoir, "Normandy proved that courage alone cannot defeat industrial supremacy. We faced an adversary who had mechanized not only warfare, but victory itself." Field Marshal Erwin Rommel left perhaps the most haunting testament. In his final report to Hitler on July 15th, 2 days before being gravely wounded, he wrote, "The troops are fighting heroically everywhere, but the unequal struggle nears its end. The enemy's overwhelming superiority in men and material is decisive. I must urge you to draw the necessary conclusions without delay." It was the language of defeat. Germany's most celebrated commander was telling his Führer that the war was lost. The Normandy campaign exposed the reality that World War II had become a war of production. German soldiers witnessed American industrial power beyond comprehension. Ford's Willow Run plant alone built one B-24 Liberator every 63 minutes at peak output. By 1944, American factories produced 96,000 aircraft, a scale of production that no ideology could overcome. Allied ammunition expenditure in a single day surpassed what Germany could produce in an entire month. One American division alone consumed more supplies in 24 hours than a whole German corps. Hans von Luck, reflecting on Normandy in his memoir, wrote, "We learned that modern warfare was no longer about tactics or valor, but about production. The Americans had transformed war into an industrial mechanism. They manufactured victory as efficiently as automobiles. The German soldiers who survived Normandy were forever changed. They had witnessed the total collapse of everything they had been taught about warfare, superiority, and destiny." Heinrich Severloh, the machine gunner from WN-62, spent the remainder of his life haunted by what he saw on D-Day. In his 2005 memoir, he recounted meeting American veterans of the landings. "We realized we had all been young men cast into an industrial slaughterhouse. My 13,500 rounds meant nothing against their endless replacements." Friedrich von der Heydte, the paratrooper commander, later became a professor of international law. He wrote, "Normandy taught us that the age of the warrior hero had ended. War had become a question of industrial capability, and we had challenged the greatest industrial power on earth with horses and outdated illusions." From the German perspective, D-Day was not merely a battlefield defeat, it was a total ideological and psychological collapse. Men who had conquered most of Europe discovered that everything they believed about their enemies, their mission, and their nation's strength was catastrophically wrong. They had expected weak, fragmented democracies. Instead, they faced an alliance that had turned war into an industrial system of overwhelming precision and scale. They watched democracy's arsenal in motion, limitless ships, aircraft, tanks, and supplies pouring from factories whose output defied imagination. The defenders of Normandy learned that modern wars were not won on battlefields but in workshops and production lines, not by the bravest fighters, but by the most productive societies. The Western Allies had redefined warfare itself, turning it into a matter of arithmetic, where production figures outweighed tactical genius. Heinrich Severloh began June 6 convinced the invasion would be repelled within hours. He ended it surrounded by empty shell casings. Watching endless waves of Allied reinforcements seize the beach he was ordered to defend. His experience mirrored the broader German tragedy in Normandy. Tactical skill drowned by strategic impossibility. The beaches became not only a battleground, but a revelation. German soldiers saw the future of warfare, and it belonged to those who could build the most and use it best. They had brought courage, training, and resolve. The Allies brought limitless industry. In trying to halt the Allied advance, the German defenders were as futile as men trying to hold back the tide. They fired until their barrels glowed red, fought until their ammunition was gone, and watched as the Allies replaced everything that was lost. The cold mathematics of modern war rendered their bravery meaningless. The soldiers who faced D-Day learned history's harshest lesson. In the age of industrialized conflict, nations unable to match their enemy's production were destined to lose, no matter their courage or sacrifice. They began June 6th as warriors of the Third Reich. They ended it as witnesses to the full, terrifying power of the arsenal of democracy. Their defeat was not just military, it was absolute. A devastating demonstration that Nazi ideology, built on myths of racial and martial supremacy, had shattered against the unyielding reality of Allied industrial might. The invasion they had vowed to cast back into the sea had instead engulfed them, washing away the final illusions of German victory.